Notre Dame fans, welcome to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Sunday, August 13th, and we've got some interesting topics to talk about today, including Notre Dame naming their team captains for the 2023 season. I'm going to break down who those captains are, kind of go look back at the last 12, 13 seasons, and just compare how this captain group stacks up to others from a number standpoint. Not that it's better or worse, just a little bit different than some of the years we've seen, certainly recently. We'll dive into that. And then also we will talk about ESPN, which has had some very strange Notre Dame takes this offseason. We released a top 50 newcomers in college football. Newcomers being first-year players at schools. So that includes transfers and freshmen. So we'll dive into that as well. And Sam Hartman was on that list. But let's begin by talking about the Notre Dame team captains. Notre Dame has named 4 captains for the 2023 season. They are fifth-year senior linebacker J.D. Bertrand, fifth-year senior cornerback Cam Hart, sixth-year senior quarterback Sam Hartman, and junior left tackle Joe Alt. Notre Dame named captains, 4 captains for the first time since 2018. It's last time Notre Dame had 4 captains. Bertrand enters Notre Dame his 5th season, and the Georgia native has racked up 183 tackles the last 2 years. Obviously, JD started at will linebacker in 2021, moved to when Maris Lewifau got hurt, moved to Mike linebacker last year, replacing Drew White, led Notre Dame in tackles again, despite missing over 2 games when you look at the injury where he missed Navy and then twice early in the season getting kicked out of the game for targeting 2 times. So he missed over 2 full games and still led Notre Dame with over 80 tackles last season, had 82 tackles last season, 108 solo stops last 2 years, and 15 and a half tackles for loss. He is now a 2-time captain. Obviously, was named a team captain a season ago. Cam Hart enters his 3rd season as a starter for Notre Dame as well. And, we weren't really sure that Cam Hart was going to be back this year for Notre Dame. He was having a really good second half of the season last year as a senior, and then he had another shoulder injury, this time against Boston College, which cost him the season, and he decided to come back for a 5th season, which gives Notre Dame a chance to have a really, really outstanding 1-2 punch at cornerback this year with obviously Cam Hart and freshman or rising sophomore now, Benjamin Morrison. And so Cam Hart is we've talked before on the Irish Breakdown message board about how Cam Hart's had a really good offseason. We've heard a lot of good things just about the work ethic he's put in this summer and then this offseason, I should say. And then, of course, he's obviously taken on a leadership role because he was voted by his peers, by his teammates, as a team captain. This is the first time he's been named the team captain. We'll stick with the Notre Dame returners first as we dive into this. Left tackle Joe Alt was named a first-time captain as well. Joe Alt's just a true junior, so he's obviously he's the baby of the group. Obviously, this group. We know that Joe Alt's probably the team's best player. He's a preseason first-team All-American. Pro Football Focus ranked him as the number, I think, 5 player in the country coming back of all positions. So it's no surprise that he's considered a top player, but it's not very often that a junior gets named a team captain. Obviously, last year we saw that with Michael Mayer, but there were 6 team captains. Kyle Hamilton was a guy that you look at that was a really great player for Notre Dame. He was recently named a captain as a junior. So we've seen it. We just haven't seen it a ton. And Joe Alt clearly has been named a team captain for his work on and off the field, but just really earning a leadership role with this football team, which was interesting because, you kind of wondered if they were to go with 4 captains, you start getting a little bit into, okay, well, which veteran is it going to be? Is it going to be Joe Alt, who's the team's best player? Is it going to be Zeke Correll, who, at least in the practices we've seen, has taken on a little bit more of a vocal leadership role this season? If they were going to go with a smaller number of captains, obviously that makes it a little bit tougher. If they were going to go with more, they could have gone with 2. And we've seen Notre Dame go with 2 offensive line captains before in the past. Obviously, back in 2017, Notre Dame had two offensive line captains. That was Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey. And then in 2018, we saw with Alex Bars and Sam Mustipher. The 4th captain for Notre Dame is quarterback Sam Hartman. Now, this was going to be a really interesting one. Obviously, Hartman is not new to being a captain. He was a 2-time captain at Wake Forest. He was a captain in 2021. He was a captain in 2022. Over the last 2 years, he's thrown for about 7,500 yards. He's thrown for 77 touchdowns. Obviously led Wake Forest to the ACC title game in 2021. The question would be, would he be able to establish himself as a leader of the team, and not just you're the quarterback leader, but just a leader enough to be a team captain? We saw a guy like Jack Cohn 2 years ago who was well respected by his teammates, but was not named captain. And this year, obviously, Sam Hartman has been named a captain by his teammates. And, I would have thought that if they were to do what they have done in recent years, they had 6 captains in 22, 7 in 2021, then it would make a lot more sense to have Sam Hartman as a captain. But I wasn't sure if they were going to have him as a captain if the number was smaller. And clearly they have, which I think speaks volumes about what his teammates think of him. From what we understand, this was a vote by the team. The players determine that. Obviously, head coaches can always have a little bit of veto power on that type of thing, but you don't normally see when numbers are small for captains, you don't normally see a coach add a guy the team didn't vote for. What you might see is you say, hey, look, this guy can't be a captain because of some rule. There was obviously a situation with Ronnie Stanley a few years ago. He wasn't able to be a captain because of some sort of team violation. But so we've seen that before, but we don't often see coaches, at least at Notre Dame, we haven't seen that, insert a guy that wasn't chosen by his teammates. So that leads me to believe that the teammates are the ones that chose Sam Hartman to be one of the 4 captains. So that's an interesting reality to what happened, is to see that. And it backs up what we've been told. We've had in some of our summer intel pieces at Irish Breakdown on the message board, the premium message board, which you should sign up for, by the way, at boards.irishbreakdown.com. But it also backs up, what Marcus Freeman and Gino Guidugli have talked about in fall camp about Sam Hartman winning over the locker room and being a guy that the players look to, just sort of one of the guys in a lot of ways. He didn't come here with the big time attitude, hey, I've passed for this number of yards, I've passed for this number of touchdowns, I'm all time ranked here, here, here. He came in and fit in very well, took a leadership role within that room. We've heard a lot of different comments and stories about the leadership he's shown to Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie, but also he's taken hold of the team. I had another conversation with somebody close to the program yesterday who echoed, Hartman's the work that Hartman has done to not only perform and execute, but to just be a leader for this football team. So that was an interesting one to see that come to pass. You weren't sure if it was going to happen. You kind of cross your fingers and hope that it does happen, because it would have meant that Sam Hartman has clearly stepped in and made himself very comfortable with his football team. So those are Notre Dame's 4 captains for the 2023 season. If you go back to 2010, I think the captain story at Notre Dame has really been an interesting one. And some of the reasoning for why certain numbers were chosen in one particular year, there were no true captains, just game captains. And we haven't had a chance to hear from Marcus Freeman as to why he went with 4 this year. Sometimes it can be, hey, this is what we're going to do, right? We're going to pick 2 on offense and 2 on defense. Sometimes it can be a scenario where there was a huge difference in votes for 4 players or 3. Maybe 5 or 6 guys get a ton of votes. They're all close. So you go with more. There's a lot of different reasons that you can go into it. We didn't see a special teams captain per se this year, just 2 guys that are starters on offense and 2 guys that are starters on defense. And we have seen a little bit of that in the past. Obviously, Bo Bauer being a captain last year had a lot to do with special teams. We saw Tyler Newsome was one of 4 captains in the 2018 season. If you go back to 2010, that's kind of the time frame which I went back and looked at this. That's sort of the most recent era, beginning with the Brian Kelly tenure. They've had 4 captains more times than any other times. We've had 5 seasons where Notre Dame has had 4 captains. Interestingly, 2 of those times were years where Notre Dame played for a championship. So Notre Dame had 4 captains in 2012. That was Manti Te'o, Tyler Eifert, Capron Lewis Moore, and Zach Martin. They had 4 captains in 2018 as well, a year in which they went to the college football playoff. Alex Barr, Sam Mustipher, which we talked about earlier, were captains. Tyler Newsome, which I just mentioned, and then also Drew Tranquil. You could say, hey, that's a pretty good recipe then, 4 captains. That's great. Well, they also had 4 captains in 2014, which started off as a great season. We had Cam McDaniel, Nick Martin, Austin Collinsworth, and Sheldon Day. But, of course, Notre Dame had that really bad September collapse that season, where it ranked as high as 5th at one point in time that season, then fell out of the top 25 after they lost their last 4 games of the regular season. Did finish strong, though, beating LSU in a bowl game. And then, of course, there were 4 captains in 2016, and we don't need to rehash 2016. But Mike McGlinchey, Isaac Rochelle, James Onwualu, and Torrey Hunter were captains for that football team. Notre Dame has had actually 8 captains before. In 2017, Notre Dame had 8 captains. including 2 walk-ons. So 6 scholarship players were captains: Josh Adams, Greer Martini, Mike McGlinchey, Quentin Nelson, Drew Tranquil, Niles Morgan. And then they also had Austin Webster and Chase Summerfield were team captains for that team. We've had 2 seasons where they had 7 captains, 2021 and 2019. They had 7 team captains. We had in 2022, last season, Marcus Freeman's first, they had 6 team captains. Obviously, J.D. Bertrand was one of those. I mentioned Bo Bauer earlier. You also had Avery Davis, who was a 2-time captain, Jarrett Patterson, who was a 2-time captain, and then Notre Dame's most recent high draft picks, Michael Mayer, who was a second-round pick, and then Isaiah Foskey, who was a second-round pick. They were also both team captains last year as part of a 6-man captain group. We've had 2 seasons where Notre Dame has had 5 captains. 2020, they had 5 captains, and then in 2015, they had 5 captains. In 2013, they had 3 captains, which is the only time that we saw that. 2011, we had 1 captain for Notre Dame that season. That was Harrison Smith. And then in 2010, Brian Kelly's first year, if you all remember that year, that was one of the more odd captain seasons for Notre Dame. That was here in which Notre Dame had no captains, no official captains. They would name new captains for each game. And that was one of the gimmicks that Brian Kelly had early on as he was trying to kind of rebuild Notre Dame after a few really tough years. So that's kind of a little bit of a brief history of Notre Dame's captain situation. So you have a 2-time captain at Notre Dame and J.D. Bertrand. You have 2 first-time captains in Cam Hart and Joe Alt. And then you have a 3-time captain in Sam Hartman, of course, this being the only year he's been a captain in Notre Dame.